on a probiotic. Digestive enzymes and betaine hydrochloride. Everybody gets flummoxed by this one because putting acid in my stomach? What are you going to do? I'm going to burn a hole. Actually, most people, especially people with reflux, are not making enough acid. Reflux is not about too much acid in your system. It's about too much acid being in the wrong place at the wrong time, like in your esophagus or in your throat at about 3 in the morning. I shouldn't have eaten that pizza. But it's not about making too much acid. And in fact, paradoxically, some folks who really just can't feel better actually feel better when we add a little bit of acid into their regimen. So I know, but it works. And people with autoimmune disorders, again, inflammatory bowel disease, since this is the inflammatory bowel disease treatment idea exchange, they actually tend statistically to be making less acid. So these folks actually will benefit and increase their digestion by adding some acid. And undigested food is just a disaster for your GI tract. You got bad bugs chewing on it and creating food sensitivities and allergies and war in Iraq and all these other things. So undigested food going through the GI tract is really a problem, and that's why I'm a big fan of betaine hydrochloride and its cousin, the digestive enzymes. Digestive enzymes recapitulate what are being made by the pancreas, and they do help break down food in the GI tract. Again, undigested food in the GI tract can only be up to no good. Normally the way I prescribe it, if I'm using both of them, is I say betaine, your acid, you take that immediately at the onset of a meal. Don't go make a phone call, don't go watch a movie, don't go argue with your kids. If you take that acid, eat, because otherwise it will hurt your stomach. Something that we do use sometimes in place of the acid, we do a little experiment with apple cider vinegar. And I'll tell them to take about a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar and 8 ounces of water at the onset of the meal. And then about 10 to 15 minutes after the meal, then I will suggest the digestive enzymes. The numbers depend on the product. You can go to Madison Drug and Terry can show you about 52 of them. But usually I'll say if you're having a meal with more raw food, because raw food will contain its own enzymes, maybe 1 or 2. If you're having a bigger cooked meal, maybe you want to double that dose. But again, I find these to be very, very important, especially for folks with digestive disorders. Vitamin D, I couldn't agree with Terry more. It's the unheralded nutrient, and again, it's not a nutrient we naturally get in food. And again, well, isn't it in milk? No. The government will add it to milk, but it's not naturally occurring in milk. It's really not naturally occurring in much of anything. Maybe if you have polar bear liver or something like that. But vitamin D is really the way we're designed to get vitamin D is from the sun. So now, unfortunately, we had people who are of lighter complexion lived up north, and people who are darker complected live closer to the equator. Now we're all mixed up. Just look at all the people in the room, and that's why the sunlight here is probably not right for everybody. But, we can be smart. 10, 15 minutes, don't go out at 3 o'clock, All right, I gotta get my vitamin D, so be smart. Now, here's a trick that I do things works. I'm not sure if what your experience is. PABA, P-A-B-A, it's a B vitamin. It used to be very popular as a topical in sunscreen, but actually if you take it internally, it will actually act as an internal sunscreen. Now you have to be taking it for several weeks, and usually about this time of year I take PABA. It's a very inexpensive supplement. It's a B vitamin in the B vitamin family, and it may actually act as an internal sunscreen. And one more thing again about autoimmune disorders, inflammatory bowel disease, most of these folks tend to be vitamin D deficient, so it's very, very important. Fish oils. Yep, fish oils. Again, I can't agree with Terry more. These are anti-inflammatory oils. But again, a kernel that Terry mentioned, and I have to emphasize, it's about balance. There are omega-3 fats, which are for anti-inflammation, and omega-6 is for inflammation. Now, if I hit my knee over here, I want a little bit of inflammation because you've sustained an injury. Too much inflammation is bad. It's truly a Goldilocks. Now, there have been some studies that have come out looking at omega-3 fats for heart disease, and many people are starting to poo-poo them. But what do you think the problem is? Now, remember I said balance here, so this is a question for the studio audience. What do you think the problem is why omega-3s may not be showing their effectiveness?
Well, if you're saying balance, you're probably using too much.
No, think it's...
They don't have enough omega-6.
I'm sorry?
They don't have enough omega-6.
They have too much omega-6 still.
Too much
omega-6.
Okay.
Because again, we always want the easy way out. You know, we want that pill, that magic pill, so just take 2 fish oils, and folks, your heart disease is a thing of the past, okay? And I got some snake oil for you also. But no, not only, this is why these are supplements. They are very important because no, most of our foods do not contain omega-3s unless you're eating a lot of fish. And not all fish, the fatty fish. But if you're continuing to consume a lot of grains, a lot of starches, a lot of commercial meat, they are very high in omega-6. So maybe you've brought your ratio down, but it's still not going to be that ideal 1-to-1 or 3-to-1. So unfortunately, unless you're really complementing the use of a fish oil with diet, I think you're really not getting the full bang for the buck with these certain foods. Now, the dosing that I'll use, especially if someone is acutely inflamed, is 1 gram for every 10 pounds of body weight, which is a huge amount of fish oil. You know, you'll get to know your toilet very well during the initial until your body starts acclimating. But maintenance, I like somewhere around where Terry is, which will work out for most people to be about 0.5 gram for every 10 pounds of body weight. And that's not adjusted for people who are overweight. We will tend to use their regular weight because the way the fish oil will dispense itself through the body. One other point, a lot of people will promote flaxseed as a source and other vegetable sources, chia seeds. Yes, they contain omega-3 fats, but these are what are called short-chain omega-3 fats, and the body has to elongate the other ones. The fish oils are long-chain omega-3 fats. The ones that are really, really important for human health are the long-chain, the EPA and the DHA. Now, if you know, you've heard me talk a little bit this evening. If you had to think of one body chemical that inhibits the elongation of omega-3 fats, what would you guess it to be? Come on, guys, you're hurting me. We talked about it. The evil insulin. What? You got to be louder. Insulin and chronic disease, inflammation. All these things will actually deter the elongation of short-chain to long-chain omega-3. So you got all these people taking flax oil. It's not doing what it's supposed to do. Why not give your body a break and you go right to the long-chain stuff, which are the fish oils. And then finally, coconut oil. Again, coconut oil, people again are very, very afraid of saturated fats. Although it's changing, I'm even seeing some people recommending cooking with lard and tallow. Animal fats are stable. You can heat them to a bazillion degrees and they're still, you're not going to hurt us. Whereas you take some of these seed oils, as soon as you put a little bit of heat on them, they start becoming oxidized and rancid, and so you're doing yourself harm. Again, this is leftover, outdated information from the 60s and 70s, this transition of oil. Animal fats are a much better cooking fat, with the exception of coconut oil, which is a saturated fat, but it's from the vegetable kingdom. The other key thing about coconut oil, it's rich in what are called medium-chain triglycerides. Terry mentioned this, the MCTs. MCT is the one thing other than sugar that can go directly into the bloodstream, and that's where that metabolic bump comes from, because you will actually gain energy. And I've seen people who go on nothing but coconut oil, and they find that they've lost 2 or 3 pounds. Now again, you're not going to lose 100 pounds using coconut oil, but it's a nice adjunct. I try not to use coconut oil as a supplement. I try to get people to use it as a food. And so you cook with it, and it does add a little coconut flavor. There are smoothie recipes, and don't add the ice in first because it will clump. But if
Yeah.
you put the coconut oil, then add the ice, it will almost give you an ice cream type effect, and it's quite delicious. So I get people to try to incorporate coconut oil as much as they can into their regular consumption. So I think that pretty much was what I had to say, and I think we're pretty much on the same page. That's just a slightly my perspective, and that kind of ends our discussion here this evening. But we're happy to do a little bit of Q&A. So Terry and I are here for